Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. In our last episode, we explored chapter 5 of Handbook of Abhidhamma Studies, the study of Nibbana, the unconditioned reality, the ultimate goal of practice. Today, we're turning to chapter 6, which is all about the classification of Dhammas. Now, you might be wondering, why classify Dhammas? Isn't it enough to just meditate and observe? Well, classification gives us frameworks. It helps us organize our understanding of experience. Just as a scientist classifies species to understand biology, the Abhidhamma classifies phenomena to understand the mind and body. In this chapter, we'll explore three major frameworks: the five aggregates, khandha, which group experience into categories; the 12 sense bases, āyatana, which explain how contact with the world happens; the 18 elements, dhātu, which analyze experience into finer components. And finally, we'll look at dependent origination, paṭiccasamuppāda, the law of causation that explains how suffering arises and how it can cease. So if you've ever wondered, how does Buddhism analyze experience? How do we understand the process of perception and suffering? This chapter will give us the tools. The first framework is the five aggregates, or paṭiccasamuppāda. The Buddha taught that what we call a person is really just five aggregates. 1. Form, rupa, physical phenomena, the body. 2. Feeling, vedana, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensations. 3. Perception, sanya, recognition, labeling of objects. 4. Mental formations, sankhara, volitions, habits, mental activities. 5. Consciousness, vijnana, awareness of an object. Together, these five aggregates make up our experience, but none of them is a self. They are impermanent, conditioned, and not self. For example, when you eat a meal, form is the body and the food. Feeling is the taste, pleasant or unpleasant. Perception is recognizing the flavor. Mental formations are the habits and reactions, craving more, pushing away. Consciousness is the awareness of the taste. By analyzing experience into aggregates, we see that there is no permanent I, there are just processes. The second framework is the 12 sense bases, or Dvadasha āyatana. These are 6 internal bases: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. 6 external bases: visible forms, sounds, odors, tastes, tangibles, mental objects. When an internal base meets an external base, consciousness arises. For example, when the eye meets a visible form, visual consciousness arises. This framework shows how contact happens. It explains perception as the meeting of sense organ, sense object, and consciousness. It also shows how craving arises. When pleasant contact occurs, craving follows. When unpleasant contact occurs, aversion follows. By understanding this, we can practice mindfulness at the point of contact. The third framework is the 18 elements, or atarasa dhātu. These are 6 sense organs: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. 6 sense objects: visible form, sound, odor, taste, tangible, mental object. 6 consciousnesses: visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, tactile, mental. So the 18 elements combine organ, object, and consciousness. For example, seeing involves eye element, visible form element, visual consciousness element. This framework gives us a detailed analysis of perception. It shows that what we call seeing is really 3 elements working together. By breaking down experience this way, we see its conditioned nature. We stop clinging to it as mine. Now we come to one of the most profound teachings, dependent origination, or paṭiccasamuppāda. This is the law of causation. It explains how suffering arises and how it can cease. The formula is: with ignorance as condition, formations arise. With formations as condition, consciousness arises. With consciousness as condition, name and form arises. With name and form as condition, 6 sense bases arise. With 6 sense bases as condition, contact arises. With contact as condition, feeling arises. With feeling as condition, craving arises. With craving as condition, clinging arises. With clinging as condition, becoming arises. With becoming as condition, birth arises. With birth as condition, aging and death arise. This is the cycle of samsara. It shows how suffering arises due to ignorance and craving, but the cycle can be reversed. With wisdom, ignorance ceases. When ignorance ceases, formations cease, and so on until suffering ceases. This is the path to liberation. By breaking the chain, we realize nibbana. How do these frameworks help us in practice? The 5 aggregates remind us that there is no self. The 12 sense bases remind us to be mindful at the point of contact. The 18 elements remind us that perception is conditioned. Dependent origination reminds us that suffering arises due to causes and can cease when those causes are removed. Together, these frameworks give us tools to analyze experience, reduce attachment, and cultivate wisdom. For example, when anger arises, we can analyze which aggregate is involved, feeling and mental formations, which sense base is involved, mind and mental object, so which elements are involved, mind organ, mental object, mental consciousness, which link of dependent origination is active, feeling leading to craving. By analyzing anger this way, we see it as a conditioned process, not as me. This helps us let go. Some critics say these frameworks are too complex. Why so many lists? But the purpose is precision. Just as a scientist uses multiple models to understand reality, the Abhidhamma uses multiple frameworks to analyze experience. Each framework highlights a different aspect. Together they give us a comprehensive understanding. Another criticism is that it's too technical for ordinary people, but even a basic understanding can help us see impermanence and not self. So, to conclude, Chapter 6 of Handbook of Abhidhamma Studies presents the classification of Dhammas. We've learned the 5 aggregates, the 12 sense bases, and the 18 elements. We've seen how these frameworks help analyze experience, and we've explored dependent origination as the law of causation. Most importantly, we've seen how these teachings help us in practice. They give us tools to observe experience, reduce attachment, and cultivate wisdom. So, as you go about your day, try to notice these frameworks in action. When you see, hear, feel, or think, reflect which aggregate, which base, which element is involved. This reflection can deepen your mindfulness and insight. Thank you so much for joining me in this deep dive into Chapter 6 of Handbook of Abhidhamma Studies. We've journeyed through the 5 aggregates, the 12 sense bases, the 18 elements, and dependent origination. We've seen how Abhidhamma classifies experience to help us understand impermanence, suffering, and not self. If you found this exploration helpful, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who might be interested in Buddhist philosophy and meditation. In our next episode, we'll move into Chapter 7, where we explore the cognitive process, or Chitta Vritti. This is where Abhidhamma shows us how consciousness flows in sequences, how seeing, hearing, thinking, and reacting are not single events, but rapid chains of mental moments. It's one of the most fascinating parts of the study because it reveals the mechanics of perception in extraordinary detail. But before we leave Chapter 6, let's reflect one more time on what we've learned. The 5 aggregates remind us that what we call a person is just processes: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. The 12 sense bases remind us that contact with the world happens through organs and objects, giving rise to consciousness. The 18 elements remind us that each act of perception is a combination of organ, object, and consciousness. And dependent origination reminds us that suffering arises due to causes and can cease when those causes are removed. Together, these frameworks give us a powerful set of tools. They help us analyze experience, reduce attachment, and cultivate wisdom. They remind us that there is no permanent self, only conditioned phenomena arising and ceasing. So as you go about your day, try to notice these frameworks in action. When you feel joy, ask, which aggregate is involved? When you feel pain, ask, which sense base is active? When you feel craving, ask, which link of dependent origination is operating? This reflection can deepen your mindfulness and insight. Thank you again for joining me. If you found this exploration meaningful, please support the channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing. And don't forget to leave a comment. I'd love to hear how you apply these frameworks in your own practice. Until next time, may your practice be steady, may your wisdom deepen, and may you continue walking the path toward freedom.